How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I have got a very special guest for you all. Today, I'm joined by the co-founder of MADabolic. Today, I am joined by the one and only Brandon Cullen. How are you doing?
I appreciate that, the one and only. I'll take it. But no, I'm doing good. Excited, doing some of the due diligence for getting ready for this. I just listened to a few episodes and I really like what your audience must be uh, signing in for sure.
Oh, cool. Appreciate the feedback. But yeah, I suppose, how are you? What's been happening in your world recently?
Um, Not really. It's been a good year. My company, MADabolic, we are in the group fitness space. I'm sure we'll be talking about strength a lot. So that's kind of our biggest, I would say, distinguishing factor. Um, the boutique space, strength is not a huge component of what usually makes it up. I know a lot of people may use the term strength, but I mean, we actually do strength and conditioning for everyday people and are very much known for the training aspect of what we do. So even though we kind of hang out in that group fitness competitive arena, I would say that we have a pretty big distinguishing factor the way we approach our training floor and the way we program design and kind of what we expect as our trainers on the floor.
Oh, nice. And exactly like what you've said. I think we'll dive into that a little bit more as the episode goes on. But I gave quite a brief, introduction at the start there. But you've touched on a couple of things in terms of, the programming for the strength, the group fitness side of things. For everyone listening who might not know your background, in terms of, creating Metabolic, your own kind of like training and journey to basically where you are now. Just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself.
Yeah, I can do it quick because you kind of get bored of your own story. But I was lucky enough that I was blessed with enough ability in my sport, hockey, to kind of chase that familiar Canadian dream to play in the NHL. Never quite got there, but fitness became like such a huge equalizer for me because being, a fringe player, getting to that next level, everyone's just so good. And it was the one thing I could control. I was lucky that knowing that I was going to jump into the top leagues in Canada, my dad got me a personal trainer at a young age. About 15, 16 is when I really started kind of like moving weight. And yeah, I'm 43 today, so we're talking late 90s, early 2000s. And at that point, hockey training consisted of a lot of like bodybuilding and cycling. That's kind of what, the going rate was. And I happened to have a young trainer out of college that came from a football background, and he put me on bigger, faster, stronger, and just kind of tweaked the time domains more for a 45-second sport versus football being maybe a 15-second sport. So, I was exposed to Olympic weightlifting, over speed training, agility, and foot speed. And I would just show up to training camp kind of in a different level of shape. I would say I didn't really know what was happening, but I was in a different shape at that time in my life compared to the people I was playing with or competing against. And that led me to training athletes in my off seasons in my early 20s and kind of got obsessed with it like a lot of us do and self-educated. And I had a unfortunate career-ending concussion kind of at like the height of my career and had to make some difficult and big decisions quick. And the last team I played for was Charlotte, North Carolina. It was called the Charlotte Checkers. It was a double A system of the New York Rangers. And the good thing was I played years here, so I had a strong presence and name in the community. Was known for training and kind of the way I played. So, launching, it wasn't crazy to think I should give this thing a go. And probably the luckiest thing was meet my co-founder on that team. And he was wired very similar to me and a fringe athlete like me that fitness became his equalizer. And we just, we bonded and we jumped into strength and conditioning pretty early, experimented through a lot of different concepts. And we just saw a big hole in the industry, kind of call it sports specific training on one end, and then very average boot camp or hit concepts on the other end. And we just noticed there was nothing in the middle for kind of like everyday high performers past their sport that still wanted to move some weight and wanted to train athletically within reason. And we wanted to create a program that could train you 25 to 55, kind of helping you age strong, age athletically. Like, we weren't exactly ready to let it go. So, and that became MADabolic, which now is kind of a living, breathing thing. And we franchise that system throughout the United States.
Cool. And with that, because one thing that you touched on there is finding that gap of people who wanted to have strength and conditioning, and one thing that you mentioned at the start was that group fitness, and especially when for a lot of people, they just think that training is, unless you've maybe been in a team environment. Myself, growing up playing rugby, you're used to having that team environment. You're used to training, not just on the field, but in the gym with other people, other teammates. How do you feel as though, at the time that you were creating MADabolic, um, how did you try and get buy-in into that group fitness? How did you kind of market that, if you like, against the one-to-one and the maybe the mainstream kind of fitness and strength and conditioning model, if you like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, this was well before going for any level of scale. So selfishly, we were creating a program that we wanted to do.
Mm.
What we found that was interesting, you have two kind of and I could say this today, 10 to 15 years into this, but like what I see in a lot of the fitness communities is two very different kind of communities. You have this I want to be seen and I want to be heard. And that's that very inclusive, everybody is welcome, very motivating kind of community. And then you have this community, I want to belong. And it's kind of this like more quiet, I want to put my head down, go to work and sweat with like-minded people. And we set out to build the second one. We wanted a place that people were proud to be a part of, training in silence beside people that they respect and like to sweat with. I always am careful how I say this, but they didn't need a high five to get through their day.
Yeah,
If we didn't exist, they'd still be kicking ass in their own right. And guess what? Both are great, both work. What I like about where we are today, when we started taking it to scale, there's a lot of those I want to be seen and want to be heard communities, and it's very busy, right?
yeah,
And they do a great job at what they do. What we just found was there was no one speaking to the high performer and saying, we know who you are, we're targeting you, and we're building this whole thing to support kind of your mindset and your goals and just your way of being. So even though there's probably no, there's less of those kind of people in the world, it's also less busy, and it's very easy to kind of take a sniper approach and just say, we're for you, and kind of let the chips fall where they may.
yeah. And in terms of, when you said there, creating a program, if you like, how did how did that kind of start off? Obviously, you've mentioned there from, your experience of training, and then, having, that faster, stronger program. How, well, I suppose a couple of questions. How did that start off in terms of the program, from, people coming in to maybe, different things, different training methods that they've done, and how has that kind of developed over time?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest benefits we did have was when we decided to branch out, it was at like the complete height of CrossFit. And what was cool there was that barbell still intimidated a lot of people. And also having such a background in barbell training, like it's very unforgiving, right? And even though I love the barbell, when you start throwing it into like a group atmosphere, we saw a whole being able to do very similar movement patterns with more forgiving pieces of equipment. So it's
Mm.
heavy kettlebells and dumbbells and heavy medicine balls. So we do a lot of the same movement patterns that you may see in a baseline barbell strength and conditioning program. But removing it allowed us to hit a different dynamic of people. Um, it was it was a lower skill, but still a high value type of movement pattern that you could teach, which we believe safely in a group class. Now, hey, I've ran some big 30, 40 person barbell classes and got through it. But when you start thinking of the business and where these people are in their life, as much as I love the barbell, I could still get people extremely strong with 100-pound dumbbells and kettlebells, and I can remove a lot of the technicality. And I'm speaking of group fitness, right? If I'm training myself as a 21-year-old trying to make the NHL, and I'm being hit into a cement wall at 30 miles an hour by a 220-pound man, you're probably going to mix in the barbell. Just, but a lot of these people, they work at Bank of America and are looking for a sweat at the end of their day and want to be strong. So like, training the perfect athlete and running a successful business is quite a bit different.
Yeah, and maybe this might be a little bit of a tangent, but group fitness at the minute now, a lot of gyms run group fitness, group training sessions to what I would say is varying standards. I think there's like with anything you can do something really well. Do you think, when you're touching on that in terms of, using different equipment within that group fitness setting, that from a coach's point of view, trying to get their clients results from a programming point of view, they're just kind of thinking, no, 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 I need to use this. This is going to look awesome. This is going to be the best group, session that people are going to have, rather than thinking about actually what's actually going to work, how can I utilize the space, how can I utilize the equipment, and maybe thinking outside the box a little bit. What's kind of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. The more we do this, because me and my partner still handle all of the program design system wide. We design on a weekly basis because we force ourselves not to get lazy and want to look at the prior week, whatever cycle we're in. So we work off of an annual calendar broken down into 4 12-week cycles with a deload week in the middle of it, which you would know is kind of completely foreign in the group fitness model. So I always find it a bit comical when one of our competitors say something like, we have 10,000 exercises in our movement database and you'll never do the same workout twice. And they say these things with real confidence, like that is a good thing. And I find the more we grow, our thinking even kind of constricts a bit, and we do the same things over that work. The body squats, it lunges, it hinges, it pushes, it pulls. We can jump, we can land, we can work on foot speed, rotate. There's not 10,000 ways to really do that. Now, I get it. I could sell it. It makes sense to say never do the same workout twice, unlimited movements. Like it probably looks good on a billboard, right? But we're firm believers that progress is something that is repeatable, it's predictable, it's something you can make very small gains on over time, avoiding the idea of plateauing. And then also the biggest thing in our industry is you just see so many overuse injuries
Yeah,
with the amount of movements. We do 5 movements a day. It's very scripted how we program. Even within a 12-week cycle, we break it down into 2-week microcycles. You're going to be doing the same things often. And I always find kind of the kiss of death of a program or the respect of fitness professionals around a program is when people keep adding unnecessary stuff into it's almost like self-preservation mode. They're not doing well enough that they have to keep adding stuff.
yeah. And I think a really interesting point that you mentioned there, maybe for, the younger coaches and trainers listening, but also for just, gym goers, is that the more exciting it is, the easier it is to sell, and you kind of get caught up in that whole excitement, I suppose. And I agree in terms of that, repeatable, it's predictable, you've got to do the same things from as transitioning from playing rugby to myself being a powerlifter, that
Hmm.
you do the same things to get the end result on the platform. But when you're um, up against all these adverts of rather than progress over a large period of time, you can do this in X amount of weeks. You can do this. You can do that.
Yeah.
Probably, starting out, was there any challenges in terms of trying to uh, sell your vision of what good training should be for progress, and how did you kind of um get the buy-in from the members? Because sometimes I'm sure you've had it, members or people will come in and saying, oh, well, yeah, there's this program that I did before, which was like, I did this in 6 weeks and I did that, but then they're
Sure.
nowhere near what they've done before. What's your kind of approach to that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and I think it's a little bit easier than where you would be. You might have even less of a consumer to chase that wants to do their big three lifts and just get better weekly, monthly, over a period of time. But again, it's clearly defined, which I personally love niche offerings. I think here's what's interesting, and I don't know, like how long you've been in the game, Stephen. Let me ask you that first.
So I've been coaching for just over 10 years, so it'll be,
Okay.
yeah, 11, 12 years.
So then I think this will be fun because one of the statements I've been making recently, I know the reign of CrossFit eventually ran into a brick wall and it hurt. And now it's kind of going the other way, right? But there was a point before it hit scale that you had some super talented people chasing this program. And the coaches in this program were highly accomplished athletes from before. And there was this window where it was very good and was very strong. And now we fast forward to say today, when they're kind of out of the conversation. And now you have driven kind of like Instagram type worker outer people or leaders. You have the rise of boutique. So all of the huge players like the Orange Theories and the F45s and the cycling concepts and the yoga concepts. And now Pilates is on fire, right? And one of the things that I've been noticing that we have more information than ever, but we have the least qualified coaches I have ever seen before. Like the people we are now bringing through on ramps, it's yeah, it's different. They are influenced by a lot of people that don't really know what strength and conditioning is. So to go back, how do we sell this new concept? It actually wasn't too hard because you had this powerhouse of CrossFit, and then you had maybe Orange Theory around and maybe like a 9 round. There was nothing in the middle that kind of said this is a non-barbell strength and conditioning program for athletes past their sport or high performers past their sport. So it had some stickiness to it, right? And people are like, man, this is cool. And,
Yeah,
I'm okay not using the barbell now. I find today you have a more uneducated consumer base. And when I say that, I don't mean dumb people. I mean, they didn't go to school for exercise science and they're being fed what we all see on these social channels. And it's difficult to kind of unwind what they may believe could be good for them.
yeah. I think that's quite an interesting point, because from the trainers that I work with, and working across two sites of bringing newer trainers in, one of the questions that I always ask is, who is it that you follow, learn from? What is it that you're reading? And a specific interview comes to mind. He just reeled off a lot of Instagram handles, and I was a little bit like, "Oh, okay. So have they got a blog? Have they got this?" No, no, no. They just share everything from there. And don't get me wrong, I think social media and the short form content everybody does it. It's kind of the all I've said before, it's the all seeing eye. It's kind of everybody has to use that to some capacity. But looking beyond that in terms of, blogs or the longer form content of like education as a coach and an understanding, um, that's important because then that is going to have a more positive impact on the gym floor and the clients that you're working with. Again, this might be a little bit of a tangent, but in terms of, the trainers and coaches that you work with or have, how do you kind of stay on top of that coach development and make sure that, the standard of, delivery of sessions is kept to that high standard?
Yeah, and that's franchising, right? It is a bit of a battle because what a lot of people that sit in my seat hate to admit to is a franchise system is a business within a business. So there is some agency there for that local owner. I mean, legally, we can't say, no, you can't hire that person. We could say, listen, I don't think they would be good on the floor, but they could say, well, Brandon, you're out of your mind. So what we can control, we do a lot on the front end. So we're all aware that people can jump into a certification and be on the training floor on Monday
Yeah.
after a weekend certification. But what we do is we start with a online education platform that I think is about, let's call it 6 to 10 hours of work prior to them getting to what we call training camp. So we still run all the training camps. It's a 2 day boot camp. Um, and we go over exercise science, program design on day one in the mornings. And then in the afternoon, they're on the training floor getting their movement tweaked all day or all afternoon. Day two is kind of like breaking down the art of a class. So that could be everything from ranking the movements from 1 to 5 in technicality, making sure that you have a traffic pattern on the floor to get there first and make those gross movement flaws. And then just honestly, the hospitality aspect of group fitness. So, knowing their story on the way in, so then you can evaluate what they look like in a warm up before they go under load and, bringing all those pieces together. And again, in the afternoon, their movements tweaked again. So pretty heavy a couple days. Then they go home into a 4 to 6 week internship that is very scripted with their shadowing a trainer, giving the whiteboard speech, shadowing the trainer, giving the whiteboard speech, and then the warm up. And we progress that over 4 to 6 weeks. And eventually they will film a class and we will evaluate how the class goes. And the final component is there is a performance test out that is required to actually be on the floor. So you can see, like, our world well enough. Like, this is not a group fitness thing. That's why we are quite a bit different on what happens on that training floor. That being said, we have 42 locations open today. So after, like, we do as much as you can and then hold those owners and general managers accountable based on is that continually translating on the floor. And to your point, there's a lot of ways to see this stuff now, right? Whether it be anonymous reviews, NPS scoring systems, and this and that, even seeing what's happening on social media, whether things are being taught right or not. You can catch some stuff, but I would say we invest so heavily on the trainer's journey to getting to the floor that once they make it there, they should be highly trained and able to implement our game plan.
Yeah. I think a key word there that you just finished off saying was just investing in the trainers. I think sometimes going back to what you said at the start there about you can do a qualification over the weekend and then be kind of expected to just jump on the gym floor. The analogy that I always use is sometimes you'll learn how to drive, you'll pass your test, and then you actually learn how to drive and deal with everything else going from there. Going back to what we spoke about earlier about the 10,000 exercises compared to this is what works, this is what you're going to get your results. What kind of um with that system, has that been changed, tweaked, altered over time, to get to a point where actually, this is the right system, the right formula to get members, coming back, getting results, and like what you said, that repeatable outcome. Because I know from a programming standpoint, when I first started, it was, yeah, I want to do this, can do this, and actually that person in front of me didn't need that. They needed something. Didn't need something slightly different. So yeah, I suppose, why how have you got to a point where your system works so well, and has that been refinement over time, or how has that kind of worked?
Yeah, so we're 12 years into this and we're always retweaking and restudying and looking at whether it be new pieces of equipment or just different ways to teach movement with, the one thing we have, if you are paying attention to the right people, we have gotten smarter in the past 15 years. Like the industry has, we've just gotten better. Like just look at the way athletes train today versus 20 years ago. It's just different, especially from a recovery side of things. Um, so I would say though, we've been working off of the same annual calendar for the last 5 years straight. Now, I think the not getting yourself lazy, meaning I said we break it up into 4 12-week cycles, but it's not like we sit down and program a 12-week cycle because we actually want to look at, okay, how did last week work out? What do we have coming up next week? Like, where do we not want to overload the system? And in a group fitness model, the thing that's the most difficult is you have people that'll come Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You might have shift workers that come Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then they're off 3 days. You got to have this idea of balancing, like each individual day has to impress the first time consumer, but no combination of the week can break a client or break an athlete with too much stimulus or not enough recovery. And that's another thing I think we're only telling our people to train with us 3 to 4 days a week. We're not saying come five, six, seven. We believe in like one of our recent partnerships, we partnered with GoRuck, and that's now becoming like what some communities are doing as their active recovery days, having like big gym ruck marches because it complements a heavy carry. It's low impact. But yeah, so I just think we think a lot different. But to your initial question, the most basic point of it is, yeah, we're always looking. But I haven't seen anything that has dramatically impressed me from a type of equipment or a new way of moving. I don't know if we'll ever see that, right? The body kind of just moves how it moves. But yeah, we've been in this same kind of pattern, I would say, for 5 straight years. But again, you get better at what you do. You
Yeah.
can see patterns, you can see puzzle pieces that fit better in certain ways. And yeah, here's one thing I'll say. I meant to say it earlier. There's ways to dress up hospitality and variety without getting away from what you do, meaning the type of music that's hot at that period of time. Shit, it can be the type of t-shirt that is on your wall and the type of bathroom products. Like you can make the trendiness happen without removing the squat, if
Yeah.
if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And is that where this might be kind of like delving into the business side of things? Because again, there's so much information out there. Everyone has a voice, and sometimes it's shouting around to be like, look at me, look at me over here. Do you think that's where sometimes, as a trend for coaches and athletes, looking for things, is that's where these fads kind of come out, whereas those they don't last that long. Like what you said there, athletes have still been squatting in some shape or form for however long. You can change everything else, but they're still gonna squat. they're still going to do some power. Yes, you can use the barbells, but using kettlebells, using plyo balls, using jumps. There's loads of different methods from there. Do you think from a business side of view, that's where sometimes coaches and gyms can struggle because they're looking for these fads rather than staying towards their values, if you like, or the concepts that actually have been proven time and time again to work?
Yeah. And it's something I'm speaking a lot about on the conference circuit this year. I know we all have to do it, right? I'm looking forward to it because I think the industry is looking for some different voices. And like, I'm a big believer that kind of the way we move this needle, like everyone's always talking about how do we get the 80% of people that don't go to a gym to get to a gym. And I think like the lazy, actually I shouldn't say lazy, it's just it comes from the right place, but it's always like we need more inclusive, non-intimidating options for the general public. And my argument to that is we have Planet Fitness. We have it's $10 a month. It's about as inclusive as you can get, right? I think the way we start moving the needle is being a little bit more specific and finding consumers that want exactly what you sell and just giving them that a whole experience. One of the things I'm noticing in our industry right now, and funny enough, it's happening to a lot of the people we look up to and the people that have done it really big for very long. When you start seeing people add in things that are not part of their core method or their, to your point, your core values, that kind of becomes that kiss of death. Um, Being really great at one thing, I don't think is celebrated enough. And I think if we, like to your point, be the best powerlifting gym there is. Well, what about cardio? That's not our thing. And maybe it is your thing. So for us, we're strength bias interval training. It's all we do. We're never going to be a cold tub facility. We're you come here to get stronger and more conditioned, and we do extremely well with that population of 25 to 50-year-old high performers. That's who we are. Doing anything outside of that to try to chase someone who maybe had Orange Theory. What if we just do this little thing because the people at F45 like this thing? I think that really takes away from just leaning into what you're great at.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. I know, having that thought process of, this is what we do. I know, starting out for a lot of, younger trainers, younger coaches is, be a very good generalist and then get more specific. I think sometimes people can become too niche too soon when they haven't got that experience. You've said there from your own training, your own experiences, it's like, okay, well, actually, I've got an area of expertise here. I've got an area of knowledge. How do you think, in terms of the landscape of the fitness industry, if you like, is having more areas, like this? Because, the minute there can be a case of, we're gonna try and sell to everybody, get everybody, or when people are coming in, doesn't matter what your goals are, we're just gonna make you fit into our system. How do you think, your approach, and you've said there about, speaking at conferences, can you see the landscape of kind of the fitness industry changing? So it's kind of like, people being more specific and, reaching out to those different populations. Because, I actually had a conversation with a trainer that I work with about, everybody wants to kind of identify as a bodybuilder, a powerlifter, a CrossFitter. People are kind of, obviously, people want to have some affiliation with something. Can you see the fitness industry kind of leaning in more towards that, if that makes sense?
I hope so, because that's where I think we move the needle. And something that I think why this becomes even more important in the next 5 years, and we're seeing it overseas where you are, some of these clubs that are launching in the UK right now, whether it be third place or Rebel One, the Lifetimes and the Equinoxes that are in the United States, like for the first time, like our big box gyms are getting beautiful. And
Mm,
they're also offering pretty good like metabolic classes, pretty good soul cycle type cycling classes. We, at least us in the States, we've yet to see like big box clubs actually be very good at the specifics that boutique has offered for a long time. So my worry for the people that don't have something that they own and it's kind of like all they do, well, what happens when you can go down the street and not only could you get a metabolic type class, but on your off days you could jump into a cycle class or a Pilates class. Oh, and by the way, they happen to have saunas and cold tubs as part of your membership in the lobby. And guess what? Their membership might be right at even with you. So how do you really stand out? You got to be pretty damn good at something. And I just favor becoming an expert in that one or two things and not trying to be something for everybody.
yeah. I think that's it, because sometimes, you can pile too many things into it, and then actually you end up getting lost, in terms of what you're doing. Do you think that's the difference with MADabolic, that level of specificity of like this is actually what we do, and that kind of, do you feel like that sets you apart from um other facilities, if you like?
Yeah, I think that's what we're trying to do, right? But even like within our franchise system, we have some weak links. And it's not always what people think, like it's model related, right? Some people can buy a franchise and all of a sudden kid number three and four are on the way and things now look different. And, you know, some people you take a chance on, they look great on paper, and then boom, adversity hits for the first time. You're like, oof, maybe that wasn't the franchise unit to solve, right? So yeah, I think that's what how we're trying to distinguish ourselves, but the risky play with the tone and position we take is we expect to be the best in your neighborhood from
Yeah,
a group fitness side of things. And if you say that, that individual location kind of has to walk the walk, right? And it's not that I can be at all 42 of our locations today, hand holding those people through them. So that's where you may run into a ceiling quicker than you believe is there because, and people hate when I say this, but try to hear the sincerity in my voice when I do say this. But if I was ever to build a franchise system again and one that I just wanted to make a buttload of money out of, I would master average
yeah,
because chasing excellence is difficult within a franchise model. It's better done in a corporate structure. But if you think of if you were to Google top 10 franchises in the US or maybe in the UK, it's probably 10 places I hope to never have to visit again. But it's scalable. It reaches the majority of the population. It's good enough. So scaling excellence is challenging, but we're going to give it a go.
yeah. Nice, cool. And I suppose with that as well, because especially when you've said there about, your focus is strength. Do you think that, because there can be elements of, just doing fitness, just doing cardio. It's a little bit easier. Just doing big. I think you mentioned, F45 there. Circuit styles. It doesn't really need that much coaching. Doesn't really need that much knowledge. People enjoy it. Got a lot of members that go to those
Yep.
those sessions. However, from a strength point, do you think by focusing on strength that there's an expectation that has to be delivered to a certain standard? Because, you know when you speak to people about strength training, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think strength training now, a lot more people realize that, and I sometimes feel daft saying this, but people realize the benefit of it, that they need to get stronger. Athletes, realize that yes, doing their sport is going to make them better, but they need to be stronger to allow them to generate power and speed. Do you think, by having that high standard for strength, it drives, that level of excellence higher, if that makes sense?
Yeah, and it's hard to turn off, right? You probably remember yourself at your best, and then coming off an injury, like how you just want to get back to feeling strong and confident. And I agree with you, like that's reaching more people today. As far as I don't know how to answer this because even the people we've mentioned, they will talk about strength training. Whether we giggle at it and say it's not that or this or that, they believe their version of strength training is right, and that's fine, right? There's a lot of there's so much opportunity in our industry. Even like think about this, like where I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. That's where we have three locations here. And in the same market, I think there is 22 Orange Series, 15 F45s. It's one of the most competitive markets in the United States, and we're good. I mean, we've been considered the top training center in Charlotte for over 10 years here. But guess what? Those places are killing it. They're doing well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of time, but I think the excellent component as it relates to strength, it's just harder to teach, right? It's harder to see the fundamental little tiny movement flaws that happen in a strength bias movement. Jumping jacks, they're kind of jumping jacks. Sprinting on a treadmill kind of is what it is. But like to find those little things to help someone's kettlebell swing have more velocity and more tension at the top of the movement. I think just what is asked of the movement, like what strength requires, is more technical. And that maybe could be called excellence. So yeah, it's just a more difficult thing to teach. And you'd probably love this, but when we're on-ramping new trainers, a lot of the things we suggest as other type of educations to like look at. And early on in the process, we're a big fan of USA weightlifting.
Yeah.
And people are like, but you're not a barbell program. I'm like, if you can see the unforgiving path of the bar, trust me, it's very easy to teach a kettlebell or a deadlift or a dumbbell front squat because like, you know it, that's your world. Like once you understand that, teaching these baseline movement patterns is very easy to see flaws.
Yeah, definitely. Because, I think, and it's interesting that you said there about, in some shape or form, other places will talk about strength, but strength is a skill. As coaches and trainers who have done any kind of level of strength and conditioning or barbell work, it takes time to master that as a skill. It takes probably even longer to be able to then replicate that with somebody else, trying to teach them. So um, yeah, I thought that was interesting in terms of the development of that and being able to explain how that works because there's a lot more things that are a lot more technical with like what you said there a kettlebell swing. There's lots of other exercises that you can do, but the level of detail that you need to go into, like what you said there, running on a treadmill, doing jumping jacks, there's very little coaching that needs to be done, and that's where again a conversation with a trainer the other day is kind of do you want to be that cheerleader and just be like yeah have music playing and go from there, or going back to right what you said at the start, what's going to allow for repeatable results and
Yep.
have and actually see people getting results because from a business standpoint, from a reputation standpoint, ultimately you're going to be judged on the results that you get with the athletes and members that you have coming in. So
Yep.
mentioning there that the top facility for the last 10 years, it shows that you're doing something right and getting those building blocks in place, which coaches and trainers can learn from to be able to do that.
And
Um,
make, oh, sorry. I was going
no,
to say,
no,
make no mistake, like you do need to figure out variety for the general consumer, right? Because when I went back to, remember I tell you that real good strength and conditioning coach I had at 15 and 16, I remember for the first 2 years, I did the same workout Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It was a front squat, it was a bench, it was a high pull, and it was a deadlift and dead hang pull-ups. I didn't even move to a hang power clean until 2 years into my program because we had to learn the path of the bell, the barbell. Um, and like you can like it's so funny because like those fundamentals just kind of like translate. Now, the way I think you get into a group fitness model, I need them squatting, hinging, pressing, and pulling often. That's what I need to happen. But whether I'm goblet squatting, whether I'm front squatting, whether I'm front squatting with two kettlebells, maybe I'm biasing one side, I'm squatting.
yeah,
So we're going to squat. Your variety is in the piece of equipment and the grip we chose to give you that day. But fundamentally, what are we doing? We're squatting. And I think that's where people make this big miss with these 10,000 exercises. Like we have 5 movements a day. You do these baseline things often. Well, when you land in other boutique concepts, you can have 15 to 30 movements in a class. How are you getting better at anything?
yeah.
So it's just different. But again, I'll always finish, supporting my own bias. If these other guys that we're talking about are the people that get you out of bed 4 to 5 days a week and moving and sweating, I'm all for that too. So,
Absolutely, and it goes back to what we spoke about before. There's levels of success and what people want. What I really like about that is, you said there the fundamentals or the foundations that everything is built on, so you can then do this or this. I love the idea of having those fundamental movements. Okay, so we're going to squat. You can pick what maybe variation we're doing, but we're going to squat. Literally
yeah.
this morning, for sessions this morning, it's a little bit like, yes, these are your two choices, both the exact same movement. The member might not know that, but it's like you can pick which one. And as well, I think what I'm a big believer in is when you're trying to get buy-in from the athletes from the members, it allows them to be involved in the process or coming in, and I think people like knowing what they're going to do. Where if it's different all the time, it's like, well, am I getting better at this, or am I getting worse? So I think as a system, that's a good model, a good model to work on. Um, we've spoken about quite a lot of things there, and a couple of tangents thrown in, but the last question that I like to ask Brandon is, from everything that we've spoken about there, and for everyone listening, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom from what we've chatted about today?
Yeah. So I'm going to be biased here because I just came off of saying whatever gets you out of bed and gets you moving 5 days a week. I do think that's important. I am a believer that strength should be the base of any pyramid. Meaning, even if you're a runner, even if you're a yogi, um, I still think like strength transfers. And I don't mean this in a rude way, but typically, like running will make you a better runner. Yoga will make you better at yoga. Strength will make you better at running and yoga. And it's very complex. And I realize there's a lot of layers to this, guys, but like strong is good and it's exciting. It's a bigger talking point now. I'm not saying you can just lift and never breathe and never do cardio. And I'm not saying you should never stretch. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if I was to advise my young kids as they start advancing into those teenage years for sports, if I'm talking to my old man who's 65 and who has had some issues with his knees and his back, Or if someone is asking me, like I've been doing this for a while, like how do I take this to the next level? I'm starting for all three of those with strength. And then I'm going to sprinkle in elements of athleticism and cardio and stamina and all that on top of those big movers.
I think that's some good take home points for everyone to take away. I think yeah, it's the foundation. You know, being strong. You know, that feeling of strong is a good feeling, and it builds on going anything from there. And until I think you've kind of or my thoughts are until people have been in a system or a place or whatever it may be that puts that emphasis on strength, you're always going to be under the illusion that you may be doing strength training or whatever it may be. So yeah, I thought that was a really good take home point at the end there. Um, Thanks a lot, Brandon, for taking the time
Thank
to
you.
jump on. If anyone has any questions about what we've chatted about today, want to check out, the Metabolic gyms, or see the content you put out there, where could people find you or reach out to you?
Yeah, so the business, if you're interested in franchising, like the concept, I'd go to the website. But I'm not here to sell a franchise. I think if you're interested in learning about who we are and what we represent, our main Instagram account it's very well done.
Yeah.
And it kind of gives you our tone, which is cheeky. It's fun. So just at MADabolic would be a good place to get a taste of who we are. As far as me, I've kind of completely siloed all of my communication into LinkedIn. Selfishly, it's just been a place to stay hyper organized, but I do a ton of communicating, whether it be DM, and I put out a lot of thought leadership, like whatever the hell you want to call it. Like I try to put my take on things happening real time in the industry and that. So find me on LinkedIn. I shouldn't be hard to find and happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Brandon, for taking the time to jump on. Really, really enjoyed chatting with you today. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.
Thank you.